In an earlier clip, we talked about differencing disks, and one of the benefits to using a differencing disk would be in the case of where maybe you were running Windows updates or you wanted to make a change to the system and it had a risk of causing a problem. And you could do that with a differencing disk, and if something did go wrong, well, then you could go back to the parent disk and get rid of that differencing disk. Well, for that particular scenario, there's an easier way. It's called using a checkpoint. Now, in previous versions of Windows, you may have known this as a snapshot, but it's pretty much the same thing. What it does is it captures the current state and the data and the current configuration of the VM so that you can easily roll back to it, basically undoing any changes to it. Now, of course, this is great for a development environment or a testing environment where you know you're making risky changes, but this is also great for a production environment when you're going to apply Windows updates or you're going to apply some kind of application update, and there's always a risk that something could go wrong. Well, first checkpoint it, and if something does go wrong, you can roll back. Now, the great thing about checkpoints is that you can have multiple checkpoints, which we'll demonstrate here. You can even merge those checkpoints into the actual VM if you want, if you have live migration set up and installed. But let's take a look at checkpoints. You'll notice on my screen right now I've got server 1, which is off. Now, one of the things you have to be kind of careful of, if you joined me in the last clip, we were working with pass-through disks. I've removed that pass-through disk. As I had mentioned back then, that one of the things is that you can't checkpoint a pass-through disk. So I'm going to have this server. It's currently turned off, and I'm going to create a checkpoint. You can also do this by right-clicking and saying checkpoint. Now, when I create the checkpoint, you'll see here in the middle of the screen, it says server 1 on this date and time was checkpointed. Now I'm going to start the server. And we'll start it. And as soon as the server comes up, I'm going to checkpoint it again. And then we'll make a change and checkpoint it and then roll back and see what it looks like. So here's the server. Let's get signed in. And with it running, I'm going to minimize this. Let's go ahead and checkpoint it again. You see, it'll say creating the checkpoint. Now you can see I've got 2 different checkpoints at 2 different times. And now let's go in and make a change to the server. Let's new, and let's create a new folder right on the desktop. It says new folder. And new text document. We'll just leave it as new text document. I'm going to go back and we'll checkpoint it again. Now let's assume for a second that the change that I just made was a change that caused a problem with the system. What I can do is I can roll it back to before that change occurred. Now, right now, there's the system in the change. Let's go ahead and roll it back. I'm going to go back in time and say apply. Now it lets you know that the current state of the virtual machine is going to get lost when you do this. So I'll say apply. And you can see that it saved it. Now it's restoring it. It's still running. Let's go back. And those changes are now gone. What a great way to protect yourself against things that you know are a risky situation, and you can checkpoint. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind. You don't want to use a checkpoint in replacement of a backup system, and for some reason, some people start to think that checkpoints are good for backups. They're not. You still need a good backup system. Checkpoints are best when used, well, just like this scenario. Also, the more checkpoints you have, well, it starts to hinder performance because Hyper-V has to keep track of where all these changes goes and has to keep track of all of these checkpoint disks that are out there. Now, you can also clean these up. If you don't need a checkpoint, you can delete them. And as I mentioned, you can merge them. In fact, if I go to the very top here, I can say delete that checkpoint or delete the checkpoint in its entire checkpoint subtree and delete it. Now I'm back to a server. See how it started to merge it? There, it brought it all back in. Now I'm back to a server that's running, and he doesn't have those checkpoints. So you can easily clean these checkpoints up. We're not done with our virtual disks yet. While checkpoints is by far one of my favorite features to protect myself and my servers in case something goes wrong with a change that I'm making, there's still a couple of more performance features we'd like to take a look at that you can use in your environment.